Hello and welcome to my breakdown video of my incredible Japanese garden environment that I made for Environments 2 at TIA. The first thing I'm going to talk about is how I build up a scene. So I was sure that I was going to do something with Japanese temples and just the Japanese culture and environment. So I chose this temple as a point of interest and then I started building around it. To start this project, I started with creating a simple blockout and then changing the blockout pieces with the actual meshes and the materials on them. While making this blockout, I started thinking about composition. So the things I'm using to improve my composition are especially most of all guiding lines, as you can see over here. Like these mountains guide you to the point of interest. Then there's this river that also leads to that. Then there's the buildings with, yeah, just the top of all the buildings and the trees that also lead to it. Here you also got some trees. And then you get these buildings that also lead to the point of interest. The thing that you also have to look out for in composition are tangents. So I made sure I didn't have any of those. Um, when I started, like these 2 points lined up perfectly, which isn't a good thing for composition. So I made sure to move things around. Another thing that I looked out for in composition was making sure that I have a foreground, as you can see over here, with the middle ground, which is this part, and then I also have the background, which are the mountains in the back. I made sure that the mountains in the back aren't that detailed. I made sure that they're very simple, so it doesn't distract you from the real point of interest. This also counts for the foreground, so it doesn't have a lot of different meshes or stuff that could distract you from the real stuff that you're supposed to look at in my environment. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the lighting that I use to improve my scene. So I started off with a directional light, which is set to movable. I have a skylight, so everything is well lit and there are no dark holes in my scene. Then I've also used a lot of spotlights, so the viewer makes sure where to look and to enhance the points that he has to look at. So my main spotlight that I'm using are these two, which make sure that the focus is on the temple, as you can see. The things that I've done for optimizing my scene is, first of all, made use of LODs, as I'm going to show you now. Like, for example, these rocks um, got different LODs. Like, this is the most detailed one, and then this is a less detailed one. Um, then another mesh that uses these LODs are, for example, the grass. You can see the most detailed one is very detailed. Then we also got different ones, like the less detailed ones. So I've made use of a lot of LODs. Then another thing that I'm using to optimize my scene is using nanite on most of the meshes, as you can see here. I'm using on most of the meshes nanite. I've also made use of some trim textures, like for example this one for the bark of the tree, which is just, yeah, a trim texture. Then another thing that could also help with optimization is avoiding point lights as much as possible. So instead of using point lights, I've used a lot of spotlights. For example, in these lanterns, I've created a blueprint which are, instead of point light, it has two spotlights. So I've got this mesh, and then I've got two spotlights, one pointing downwards, which is the most important one because there should be some light going onto the floor. And then I've got one that points to the top, which you can also see on the sides of the stairs. But this one is less intensive and is less important than one pointing downwards. To make my scene feel more dynamic and alive, I've added a lot of particle effects to the scene. The first one is this dandelion particle effect that blows in the wind. The second one, and I think the most important and pretty one, is the falling leaves of my tree, like the pink leaves that are falling down in the wind and then with collision stay on the ground, as you can see. Then the next particle effect I've added are these butterflies on top of my bridge, which add a bit more color to my scene. Then another thing that I've added is creating a blueprint for the birds in the sky so they go forward. I've added an animation for them so they start flying. You can see different birds flying, and the way that they move forwards is I'm just updating their position inside of a blueprint. Another thing that makes my scene feel a bit more alive is the water that moves, because if the water would just stay still, I don't think it would be as immersive for the player. Last but not least, are the things that I would do to improve my scene if I had a bit more time. Something I did want to add in the beginning was a small waterfall. Like I was going to create some rocks on top of each other with a waterfall going downwards in them, but I didn't really find a good material for the waterfall itself. I tried out a lot of stuff, and every time it just made my scene look a bit less realistic, so I just deleted it. And then another thing that I would improve is my boat model. Right now it's all kind of made out of the same wood, and I would like some different textures on it. But with the time that I had, I couldn't really find a different and as high quality model as this one. Another thing that I would add to my scene is like a god ray going downwards from here to my temple, so it really creates more focus on top of the temple. I would also add a bit more post-processing, because my post-processing doesn't really add a lot right now. I've tried some different stuff out, but every time I've changed stuff, I like my original scene more, so the values that I have in my post-process volume are really low. A last thing that I would do to improve my scene is maybe create a different material for the water, because maybe make it see-through and put some fishes inside of it, or add some foam to the sides where there's collision with the island. And that's most of the stuff that I would improve on. I hope you like my scene because I'm really proud of it. Thank you.